They may be called the next generation, but they're the church of today. Reach, disciple, and mobilize students to share the hope of the gospel. This is Next Gen on Mission with Shane Pruitt and Paul Wooster.
Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Next Gen on Mission podcast. My name is Shane Pruitt. I'm the Next Gen Director for the North American Mission Board. And with me always is my ride or die, my co-host, Paul Wooster, our National Collegiate Director. What's up, Paul?
What's up, man? Hey, I had my a midlife crisis moment, man, yesterday. I don't know if you saw on my Instagram, but I busted out my skateboard. I took my 10-year-old son to the skate park, and I busted out a 13-year-old skateboard and tried to do a board slide on it, and it just snapped. Right? I got it on video. You should check it out. If you guys want to check it out, look on my Instagram. But I should send it to that Kook Slams thing. But needless to say, it's motivated me to lose those last 10 or so pounds.
So you're saying that skateboard had a weight limit. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, I'm just impressed. I mean, because Paul, you're a boarder, a surfer, and dude, I can't do any of that, man. I can barely walk without falling down. So, man, mad props to you. And then I see, man, you've been hitting the CrossFit gym. So, man, they say muscle weighs more than fat. So we'll just say it's your muscle that broke.
Yeah, that's what I'll go with. Yep, that's good.
Awesome. Hey, Paul, I'm so excited about our guest today. He's a dear friend to you and I both. And he is a high capacity leader. God's done amazing things through him, continues to do amazing things through him. But even in a high capacity leadership role, he is still one of the most kind, humble, meek, encouraging leaders I know. So I'm so excited to have him on today. And Paul, we're talking about no one other than the great Bill No. He is the Associate Director of Texas Baptist Center for Collegiate Ministry, former campus minister, Collegiate Ministry volunteer at his church. He loves to see college students grow in their walk in the Lord. He was also previously a Collegiate Director for Lifeway. God has just done so much through this man, continues to do stuff through this man. He just got so much wisdom and experience. So I'm just excited to tap into that today. So Bill, welcome to the Next Gen on Mission podcast today, my friend.
Man, thank you guys. I wish I could just have you all follow me around, kind of be like hype guys all the time. That would be
anytime, man. Anytime.
Yeah, Paul and I can definitely do the hype. Yeah, we are definitely a hype duo. We love that. Hey, Bill, today, as you can see, those that are listening, you can't see, but those that are maybe watching the video that we have on our YouTube channel now, is Paul, in honor of you as a new Texas native. Hey, welcome, first of all, to the greatest nation in the world, Texas. I have my DBU hat on today, Dallas Baptist University hat and shirt on, just for you being on today.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm trying to learn all the Texas lingo. I've figured out two really important things are Whataburger and Buc-ee's. So, trying to make sure I work those into my Texas lifestyle, but it's been a great transition to Texas.
Man, hey, you're learning quickly. You're learning quickly, my friend. Hey, Buc-ee's and Whataburger, if you run on those two tracks, you will be welcomed into the fold very quickly, man.
I went to In-N-Out when I was in Waco, Texas, and the weirdest thing is there was no line. Because everyone was at Whataburger, I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah, buddy. Yeah. I remember when, if y'all remember about 3 years ago, Whataburger was bought by an outside corporation outside of Texas. And man, you would have thought mutiny took place here in Texas. They were like, traitors! Yeah, but we still love it. We're still loyal. Hey, Bill, we always ask our guests this. Before we get too spiritual, what's one fun fact we need to know about you that we may not already know?
I'm going to say two. One, probably a lot of people know, but I have kind of an addiction to Diet Coke. The one that's probably a little more interesting is I actually had a slaughter class in college because of being an animal science major. I had a lab where me and a partner would have a pig walk in and we would take it all the way down to pork chops. So that was very interesting part of my college journey.
Wow.
Oh man, I just have this picture of you sipping on Diet Cokes, just like chopping pigs up, man.
Dude, no doubt. From now on, you are known as Bill the Butcher, man. You are Bill the Butcher. Yes.
Awesome. I love that. Those are definitely unique, especially the
Yeah.
second one. So we're jumping into more serious questions. What do we need to know about Generation Z?
You know, one of my favorite things about Gen Z is their love for diversity. And I think they hold this bright hope for really seeing some progress in some of the long overdue areas that we need to see some change, both in the church, within the church, and within society as a whole. So I love how much they embrace diversity. I think another thing about Gen Z, especially for ministry leaders, that has been insightful for me to just remember and realize is how much more post-Christian they are, increasingly post-Christian, obviously more so than any other generation. And I think especially for somebody like me that's done so much ministry in the South and now in Texas, that especially for ministry leaders in those areas, I mean, guys like you in California, you've kind of already, are further down the track. But
Right.
I think for many of us, it forces a shift in how we approach ministry. And we've got to be more about, we should have always been first and foremost about engaging with the gospel, but I think even more so now that's important, that we can't just be about gathering Christians, because on the college campus and in our youth groups, that's definitely not the majority anymore.
Yeah.
We've got to move more to being proactive about engaging our students with the gospel.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. I love that. I agree completely. And Bill, that's why I always enjoy being around you. You and I first met, we had both heard of each other, but we first met in person. We were at an event equipping collegiate leaders. And I was there teaching a breakout, and you were there speaking as well. And we got to meet there. And then you and I were together literally when the world was changing during spring break of 2020. Do you remember that? We were in Panama City Beach during Beach Reach, and you and I were together getting to see college students go share their faith with other college students during spring break. So I love your passion for the gospel. Like, you love reaching people the gospel, but you also love equipping people the gospel, and you're so practical on that. So I love how fired up you are about knowing Jesus and making Jesus known. Where does that come from? Share a little bit of your story with us.
So I definitely grew up in the church and was always around Christianity. That's a big part of my story from the very beginning. But it was really for me during college that, probably like a lot of people, really owned my faith, because it was the first time that deciding whether or not I was going to wake up on Sunday and go to church was my decision. And, thankfully I had a strong foundation to then grow from and to be set up well to really own that faith in a more personal way. But I think during college, engagement with missions and opportunities to be involved in leadership, where I was not just learning, but exercising how God gifted me for ministry and learning my spiritual gifts and using those, was so huge in my life. But I think also, just looking back, probably the thing that's had the biggest impact on me is just constantly coming back to the gospel and reminding myself of that Jesus in my place. It's interesting you mentioned Beach Reach, because I think those especially are standout moments for me that were so pivotal and central in just kind of helping me stay on that trajectory of having a heart for the lost. Because there's something about those kinds of experiences that kind of help bring you back to that personal need for the gospel, while also, actively engaging and sharing it. And especially in that Beach Reach environment, it's not a us versus them kind of mentality, or us versus them kind of ministry. It's a leading with understanding your own brokenness, your own need for the gospel, and then you can't help but leave our worship services and go out and share and engage with a lost world. So those things are all things that have been really important for me.
Yeah, it's good.
Love that. Yeah, that's so good. I mean, think about my own story. It was a conference, a winter conference. I grew up in church, and it was at that conference that God really opened my eyes to his mission and all that. So there's something about these catalytic events, these mission experiences, and really GenSend, NAM, we have these things called GenSend breaks that we do, these short-term, 1-week little experiences. And we also do summer-long projects. This is a little free advertisement. This was not planned, but I just felt like, hey, we have those. If anyone's listening, for college students, even high school students, we have missions experiences. And I know Bill has been involved in a lot of the behind the scenes work. And really your heart, I can tell, is to encourage and equip leaders especially. And so I know that's something that you're really passionate about. So why do you think investing in other leaders is so strategic? And what advice would you have for someone that wants to get involved in that, encouraging other leaders, and they don't know exactly where to start?
Yeah, so I think one thing I would say, especially in terms of, why it's important to invest in, encourage other leaders, is because no model, no group, no one method has cornered the market on reaching lostness. And so we need everybody. We all have something to learn, but we all have something to give. And so I think that encouragement of other leaders with one another is so important to help kind of keep everybody at the table and keep everybody on the front lines. And so I think just one suggestion or tip is just not to overlook those small opportunities you have to listen, to encourage other leaders. Social media, I think, is a great way to do that. As you see other people sharing about what's going on in their ministry, to be quick to like, to be quick to say, way to go, quick to say, so thankful for you, we're all in this together, love hearing the story of ministry on your campus. Like, I think that just goes such a long way in continuing to motivate and encourage one another when we can often feel isolated and alone and overwhelmed with the ministry need. We need that encouragement from one another to kind of keep pushing us forward.
Yeah, I really like that piece you mentioned, even on social media. What feels small is actually a big deal. Like if someone posts, or if someone sends out an email newsletter, just a quick response saying, hey, good job. Like a lot of collegiate leaders send these email newsletters, and I've sent out a bunch of them, and it felt like it was just, I sent out to hundreds of people, but nothing. Like we had led a bunch of people to Jesus. I'm like, okay, I hope they saw it. I don't even know. But just getting one response, it's encouragement goes way farther than we think it does. So.
Yeah, I agree. And I almost feel like in today's kind of world that's very polarizing, especially on social media, being able to encourage each other on social media, because I think there's some out there that think like cynicism and criticism are fruits of the Holy Spirit, and they're not, And so just to encourage one another to go, hey, we're in this race together and run this together, and affirming and celebrating each other is so helpful, and we really are better together. And so, Bill, even in light of that, you work with so many next gen leaders, and Paul does as well, and I do as well. And one thing that we keep hearing, is just so many leaders are tired, frustrated, confused, on the edge of burnout, considering walking away. Some have walked away. Unfortunately, we even know some personally who not only walked away from ministry, but they're claiming to walk away from the faith, Right. And so what are some just common things that you're hearing from next gen leaders today that they're really struggling with? And then maybe how we can be an encouragement there. Yeah.
I'm not sure that I've ever not heard a next gen leader that has shared with me that they haven't felt like they're on an island at times. I mean, I think there's a common thread of feeling isolated and alone. And, I think college ministry leaders, often they feel like, I'm the only one that shares maybe this burden for my campus, or they're an on-campus ministry leader. They kind of feel isolated because they don't have, a rest of a church staff or anything around them. I think youth ministry leaders sometimes can feel like, they're on their own, isolated in this one ministry area, and the other church leaders are just kind of going on with other areas. And it's easy for next gen leaders to feel isolated and alone. I think also, as I talk to them, there's often a unique rhythm to our ministries, which may play into that, because our rhythms are different maybe than
Yeah, that's right.
The church calendar or something like that. That can also make them feel isolated. But it also, especially thinking about college ministry leaders, I'm sure the same kind of thing exists in youth ministry world. But for college ministry leaders, that rhythm of, the beginning of the semester, you're like all out sprint through, the middle of September, and then maybe you have a little bit of a breather, but it's still, full on ministry through the whole semester. Then Christmas break, you get a little bit of a break, but then it all starts over again in the spring and the summer. You kind of have a break. So it's kind of these start, stop, sprint, pause rhythms that, especially in those all out sprint times, is just easy to feel depleted and to then feel even more isolated and all that. So I think those two things I hear often from college ministry leaders and next gen leaders. I think also, especially when I was at Lifeway, one of the unique things that I got to do is plan big conferences for lots of leaders to be part of. So always talking to groups about what are the areas that you need training in, or what should our breakouts be, and kind of evaluating from year to year, how did this go? What do we need more of? What, was amiss? And, just as I think about all the different breakouts that we planned and led and got feedback on, some of the standout things that I heard over and over again, anything dealing with counseling was always got positive feedback on, because I think our people feel unequipped for unique counseling needs like anxiety, depression, suicide, those types of things. Yeah. Also, anything that we did on how to biblically but lovingly address gender and sexuality issues, those were always so huge. And again, I think it revealed that our people just didn't feel like trained in seminary exactly for how to handle that. I mean, I'm sure they knew. So here's a few verses that I can, pull together to help formulate my theology on this, but to really, know how to minister on campus or in a youth group with either students who are dealing with same-sex attraction or, with students whose best friend is asking about transitioning their gender, feel so not prepared for that to do that well. And then I think too, some other topics are just communicating, social media, marketing. Those are things I think everybody feels like, oh, this is such a need in my ministry. I ought to be doing this better. I do this more. But I think they didn't feel, they don't feel like that's something they got trained for. They feel like they're not doing it well enough. But I think they also feel the time crunch of like, I don't have time to figure this out and do this better. So those are some needs that definitely are standouts that I've experienced.
Yeah, that's really helpful to process and consider, is that thinking about, it's kind of a perfect storm of leaders are feeling a little bit discouraged and isolated, and their own personal mental health may be struggling. And then they have all these students that are struggling with it too. And they have no idea about how to deal with all these things that are just complex. And so I think there is a need for leaders and even event resources and conferences, but mainly just a coach, someone you can talk over things with. And that's what you're doing, Bill, across Texas. You're getting to mentor and help a lot of leaders there. And I love, and the college campus is like the front lines of the battleground for these things and for the next generation. And so I'm so glad that you're on the campus. Like, you've been focused on college ministry how long? And why do you think college ministry is so strategic? And then my follow-up to that is, what do you see as a key to the health and growth in the field of college ministry as a whole? So kind of two things. Why do you think it's so strategic? And what do you see kind of big picture for college ministry to grow healthy across the nation?
I mean, obviously, those of us who have given our life to college ministry have probably a lot of reasons why we think it's so important and strategic. But I think it's just such a unique mix of potential with college ministry, next gen ministry, that there's this great potential in the student, but also this great openness to knowing that their whole life is in front of them and they're making all these key decisions about their future. So just the the opportunity to impact them with the gospel and for Christ as they're making all these lifelong important decisions is huge.
Mm-hmm.
I think also there's a unique freedom and availability that they have. Now, maybe a lot of college students wouldn't say that. They're like, I'm
Right.
the person in the world, and there's no room in my schedule. But we know the reality is they have a lot of freedom in how they spend their time, and they have a lot of availability to say yes to whatever God might call them to, because they're not tied down. I mean, even if you have a family and a job and all that, that shouldn't keep you from saying yes to God. But I think some of those things that more easily tie people down, they don't have. So just the sending potential there is huge. Also, I think if you think about just the world coming here, I mean, internationals, especially in college ministry, are studying on our college campuses, and not just any international students, but the world leaders have come here, and we have such a opportunity to reach them during those times. So I think those are some key reasons why college ministry is so strategic and important. There's tons of others as well, but I think kind of the second part of your question about some ideas on how do we, keep moving that ball forward. I think one thing is, especially for those of us in Baptist world, we have to be creative with our funding. I mean, expensive to do college ministry, and historically, funding has happened one way. There's definitely been, even over the last 20 years, a lot of changes there. But if we're not careful, I think we can become budget limited and not vision driven in the areas of college ministry. And so I would really encourage people that are engaged in college ministry to not be afraid to dream, and let kind of the budget put a lid on what you would want to see God do. I think also, just mentioned it a little bit earlier, but embracing all models. That there's so many college students, so many lost college students. We need as many people at the table reaching students as possible.
That's right.
That's good.
So continuing to celebrate anybody that wants to be at the table reaching college students. Yes, we need that. We want that. And let's all work together to do that. And then too, I would just say an overall focus on lostness and sending students. If there's somebody that wants to be a naysayer of college ministry, or say it's too expensive, or any of the barriers or reasons that especially like Baptist systems might want to put up against it. If college ministries are impacting lostness and seeing students come to Christ, and we're seeing students sent to the nations and throughout North America reaching pockets of lostness, like those are just things you can't argue with, and you can't help but celebrate, and you can't help but want to do and be a part of. So I think as we continue to just emphasize and grow in those areas, it's going to help college ministry grow across the board.
Yeah, Bill, that is so rich, man. I love that. Just how you broke down. We need all forms. We need all strategies at the table. We're better together. When you think of 21 million college students, and the vast majority of them don't know Jesus, connected to the local church. And then I also love, what you're alluding to of utilizing those single years. And I think that's a charge to us as ministries and as churches, is to help singles live on mission. I think sometimes the church thinks their mission is to help singles get married, and it's not. It's our calling to help singles live on mission and to thrive in those years that God's given. So thank you so much for Bill for that. And so, as you can tell, listeners and friends, just the depth of the wisdom and experience that Bill has. So, Bill, I want to toss this next question to you real quick. If you could sit down with a next gen leader, a brand new BCM or BSM director, a brand new college pastor, a brand new youth pastor, and you could give them one piece of advice of starting out in their ministry, what would you tell them?
I'm going to cheat here too and give you two. The first one I alluded to earlier when I was sharing my story, but it would just be keep coming back to the gospel. When I look back over, 20 plus years of college ministry, the times that I wanted to drift back into, I have legalistic tendencies. And so when I wanted to drift back into leading in legalism, or when I started feeling burnt out or when I felt discouraged by ministry results. Now it's easy to look back and see that those also often overlapped with times where I was ministering out of my own strength and out of, partly maybe my own desire to make prop myself up, and not out of the place of really understanding that God has met my greatest need through Jesus. And the times where I look back and realize like that's what I was operating out of, those were the most fruitful and enjoyable and meaningful periods of ministry for me. So, man, I encourage any ministry leader, but especially with next gen leaders, to constantly come back to that. Also, I think
it's good.
A college ministry, like that's what's going to be attractive to students. They're not looking for, they don't want to be about sharing a list of rules for people to get on board with. They're not looking to, tell their their classmates about, some awesome church building to come see. But if we can connect them to the grand story of Jesus, like that's what that satisfies and that draws people in. And so I have to stay in that place too.
That's good.
And then I think the other one is just remembering that there's always going to be stuff that's going to want to draw you away from the main lane of college ministry.
That's right.
Really engaging law students on campus. There's always going to be administrative tasks. There's always going to be cliques in your ministry that you want to break up and that are going to be nagging you to do certain things. There's always going to be, immature Christians in your ministry that you feel like you're trying to, that can eat up a lot of your time.
Mm-hmm.
You can't ignore all that stuff, but you can't let that, if I wasn't careful, that would sap all my time and energy and draw me away from what was really most important. If I didn't intentionally say, I'm going to protect this part of our ministry and this time that we're going to spend out on campus or engaging law students, and you making sure that those things stay at the forefront.
Man, what a great reminder. And, I've heard somebody say this before. We never drift towards living on mission. We always drift away from it. So we always got to fight to get back into that lane and to stay in that lane. That's so good. So with that in mind, Bill, we always close our conversations with our guests with the same on mission charge, that the heart behind the Next Gen on Mission podcast is to see the next generation realize they are the now generation, not the future of the church, but the church right now, that they have a mission on their life now. They're called to live on mission now. Would you give us one closing thought on this?
Yeah, so I think for both college ministry and youth ministry, strong leadership is critical, but I don't think there's anything that can replace students reaching students.
Yeah.
So if we're only focused on preparing our students for future ministry, we're going to miss our greatest ministry asset for doing ministry now and reaching students now. So I think maybe then one practical step, and really it's more a practical question, is just to encourage you to stop and evaluate your ministry and ask, are you coddling or are you releasing? And I can think of times in ministry where I did both, and it's easy to fall into that. But I think about this kind of unique season in Texas BSM. I think it's partly coming out of the pandemic. I think it's partly because we talked about Gen Z being more post-Christian and there's an openness to spiritual conversations, but we've seen just droves of college students accepting Christ.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Think about the campuses where that's happening the most. It's where we do this part well of really training students to engage and share Christ, and seeing students accepting an invitation to know Christ from another student. It's not just our staff that are going out and doing it, but it's really raising up students to be able to do that. And as we are doing that in some places, just tons and tons of response. So it's been really exciting to see.
Wow, that is so good. And it's a shift from the students helping you with your ministry to you're helping the students with their ministry. And Bill, I've always seen you as that type of leader, that hero maker type leader. Even just in all the different roles that you've had, you always you're happy to play the behind the scenes role, and as long as the ministry is happening. And so that's with our listeners, man, don't worry about being in the spotlight. Like, let other people do it and leverage their gifts. So thank you so much, Bill. How can people connect with you moving forward?
I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the social channels. You can definitely find me on the Texas Baptist website. Email address bill.no@txb.org, and happy to connect and help any way that I can.
Awesome, Bill. Thank you so much, my friend. Been such a rich, deep conversation, so practical as well. And friends, thank you so much for listening to the Next Gen on Mission podcast. We know that you were probably encouraged by this conversation, just like we were. I was learned new things, and also were reminded of things that I already knew that need to put in practice. And I know that's probably true for you as well. If this conversation generated any questions for you, then hey, don't hesitate to reach out. We want your questions. So feel free to email us at evangelism@neom.net, and we'll try to answer those and even address those on future podcast episodes and conversations. Also, if you're enjoying the Next Gen on Mission podcast, be sure to give it a like, a follow, a 5-star rating. Paul says only 5-star ratings are allowed. I'm just kidding. So give it a 5-star rating. Share it with your friends, other leaders in your context. And we pray that you have a great rest of your day and tell somebody about Jesus.